It's time for a little Longhorn football talk on a Friday afternoon. I love these kind of impromptu or late in the afternoon talks, especially when something positive might happen for the Longhorns. I'm Bobby Burton, joined by Jerry Hamilton and CJ Vogel with a special Longhorn live stream. We're following Nick Brooks, big offensive lineman out of Grayson, Georgia, announcing his decision moments from now. He's supposed to go live on his Instagram feed at 3 o'clock today. Jerry, myself, CJ Vogel, all here to talk a little Longhorn football. Texas currently at 16 verbal commitments on the recruiting campaign. They've got 4 offensive linemen, three from the state of Texas, 1 from the state of California. This could be number 5 from the great state of Georgia. Jerry, you have been talking about this young man, large young man, all the way back in January of this year, saying that Texas had a better shot than many people realized at the very outset. Tell us what you know about his recruitment as we're heading into the final moments.
I'm calling him larger human, by the way, because CJ posted the photo. You can go back on his Twitter. CJ, you might be able to bring that up, that tweet from when he arrived for his official visit. But that was something. It was almost like the 747 was walking through the terminal at Austin Bergstrom Airport. And this one actually works. And so, look, here's the interesting thing. When Kyle Flood went to Cedar Rapids, where Brooks was at the time, went to JFK High in January, that's given up an entire recruiting day. And you only have so many days you can be on the road, and the window is small. So to give up an entire day going to Cedar Rapids and back to the next place you were going, that means Texas felt like they had a real – there he is. There's Nick Brooks. That's what 6'7", 360 looks like.
That's a big boy.
Yeah, man.
You start calling him the
guys that look like they swallowed an oak barrel.
I gotta tell you what you don't realize is that bag he was carrying was 8 feet tall. That's what you don't realize. But no, so when Kyle Flood went to Cedar Rapids, to see him in person, you were like, okay, Texas has a legit shot here. But he had never been on campus. And then Nick Brooks comes on campus for the spring game. And they kind of, CJ and I talked about at the time, does this remind us of Brandon Baker at all? Different circumstance, but Brandon Baker came for the spring game, then scheduled the official visit, and Texas ended up doing really well in that recruitment. Now, Nick Brooks has been a Georgia lean. He was a Georgia lean in the spring. He's a one-time Iowa commitment. So his background, he's from Cedar Rapids. He was Cedar Rapids freshman year, moved to Atlanta area, Alpharetta private school for family, work sophomore year, back to Cedar Rapids junior year, now back to Grayson and Loganville in the Atlanta area senior year, all for obviously work stuff with family. So there are no red flags or anything. It's family moves. It just happens sometimes. So he came for the spring game, and the crazy thing is, as big as he was, nobody saw him. Remember that, CJ? We're like, where's the biggest guy? We can't even find the biggest guy in the stadium.
I had no clue how he snuck past this year. We had a lot of eyes out there, too.
Yes.
And all of a sudden, we missed the biggest person in the entire airport.
That's right. So somehow we missed him, or he missed us very well. And then he comes back for the official visit, and Georgia's getting most of the run. And it's coming down to Texas, Georgia, and USC, right? And then we started hearing more about Texas having some momentum. There's some confidence in Austin, and we're about 10 minutes out from his announcement. We'll see what he announces. But Texas gained some confidence there from that spring game visit through the official visit. But if he goes all the way back to that recruitment, when Kyle Flood took a full day on the road and went to Cedar Rapids, I kind of took a step back. I remember talking to you guys. I was like, you don't do that unless you feel like you have a legitimate shot at the kid. Then he sets up the spring game visit, then the official visit, because you could go see 4 offensive linemen in Georgia that day that you're flying to Cedar Rapids and back. So that was a pretty telling sign that Kyle Flood thought he had an in, and how much he likes him. And Bobby, CJ, and I were talking about this on the live stream. How many linemen from Cedar Rapids have been a battle between Texas, Georgia, and USC before? So that tells you his upside in what the colleges think of Nick Brooks.
I hear you, Jerry. All right. Hey, by the way, as we wait for Nick here and get going and talking, one of the things I wanted to mention is that a lot of the other recruits and players Texas is interested in actually had their first scrimmages yesterday. Khalid Lockett caught a touchdown pass, some other things. Diabell had a good week. That he's playing tonight, by the way. But long story short, maybe the play of the week, guys, came from Chester. Our friend CJ pulling this up for us. Watch this play, guys. You think he's got some athleticism and ability? Holy cow. What is that?
That's how you
3
stick with the
tips.
ball.
1, 2, catch, and go. Fort Bend Marshall cornerback Caleb Chester, currently the only defensive back committed to the University of Texas in this recruiting class. Jerry and CJ, Jonah Williams, defensive back out of Galveston Ball, looks to commit somewhere tomorrow at 6:30. Jerry, I know you're going to be down at that announcement. CJ, you talk about Nick Brooks, though, in the one that we're tracking today. I give you a chance here to give your spiel on Nick Brooks, just like Jerry just did.
Well, my biggest thing is, we showed the video of him walking through the airport there, Bobby. He's just a big human, and he falls in line with exactly what Kyle Flood has had success with, right? These big bodies that he can mold a little bit, maybe not be rushed onto the field right away, but you can sit back behind the scenes and work with them, right? We've heard great things about Andre Kojo, Jaden Chapman, Connor Stroh. Again, some guys of similar body size. Cam Williams, we saw what he's already been able to do a year ago against Kansas State. Expected to be a guy 2 years into development and going on to year number 3 to be a number 1 starter for you at right tackle. And Jerry, you've been a guy that we've talked about in the past. It sounds like NFL scouts are already starting to take notice of Cam Williams before this season even begins. That's all because of the body size, the shape, and the development behind the scenes. What's going to be great for Texas here, and especially for Nick Brooks, is he's not going to be a guy that's going to be forced onto the field because of the depth of talent at the tackle spot, right? I see him as a right tackle. I think he or John Mills could be your right tackle in this class. Luckily for them, they're not going to be forced into action right away because what's ahead of them? Well, 2 really talented guys in Andre Kojo and Jaden Chapman, but also Brandon Baker, who's a true freshman, who's already starting to get some run a little bit with that second unit at times as well. So there's going to be a lot of depth. There's going to be a lot of time for these guys to work on their bodies. Should he end up choosing Texas, that kind of a timeline is going to be very beneficial for him by the moment that he's officially ready to go. I see the comment here from Naaman Roberts. What's his measurables? Well, I think that's going to – Jerry, I liked your comment earlier. It depends on what he ate that morning, but he's up there probably north of 360, 365. But he's – as 6'7" as 6'7" gets in my, kind of naked eye right there, he looked huge when I saw him walking through the airport earlier this summer.
He's not a listed 6'7" that's 6'5" and a quarter. He's a legit 6'7" and 365 with 85-inch wingspan. And that's what he is. And he really hasn't even started scratching the surface. We talked about this morning on Coffee and Football. He's had, because of the family moves, he hasn't had any football consistency in high school. So he is a guy that I think is going to ascend in a college strength and conditioning program, maybe even more so than some kids do, because he just hadn't had that football consistency because of the work moves within the family. So that's the thing. He's been to 3 high schools in 4 years, JFK twice. But that means 3 different head coaches. That means 3 different systems. That means you moved during the summer, so you missed strength and conditioning time if you've been at the same school. So there hasn't been much football consistency. In his tape, he always gets better the second half versus the first half of the season. He's good. He looked good last night against a really good Thompson team. There are some times where you could tell he's playing his way into shape as well. But his tape is second half of the year looks totally different than first half of the year, because he does play his way into shape. He gets comfortable in a new scheme, in a new system, with a new head coach, with a new offensive line coach. That's a lot of change for a high school kid year after year. So that's why, to me, you almost say put the first 3 games of his tape away, watch the last 7, 8, 9, and with Grayson, they may play a while, 7, 8, 9, 10 games. After he gets accustomed to where he's at, who's coaching him, this scheme, his new teammates and everything, and boom, you see, and loses about 10 pounds early in the season, you start to see a different player, Bobby, the way he reacts to sudden movement in his peripheral.
All right, there's about 1 minute left here before he is supposed to announce. Jerry, before we get to his announcement and find out what that is, I want you to say thank you to our sponsor, the guys over at Duck Camp, an Austin-based business.
Yeah, absolutely. Duck Camp, I'm wearing a hat, corduroy hat. The only one I wear like this, by the way, is made for the people that live in the moments out there where there are fish to catch, birds to hunt, time to kill, football to watch. They like doing all that stuff. So Duck Camp built a company centered on it, based in Austin and dedicated to giving people best-in-class hunting and fishing apparel. For those of you that are out there that look forward to the opening day of hunting season and the kickoff of the Longhorn football season with the fervor and excitement of a 5-year-old on Christmas morning, Duck Camp is here to let you know that from opening day to game day, they've got you covered. At Duck Camp, they believe you can't just sit around and wait for the adventure to come to you. You got to get on a plane and go to Cedar Rapids and recruit it. You have to get out there, stay out there, and make the most of every second. Here's to a great season, y'all. Yes, hunting and football. Shop gear at duckcamp.com.
Duckcamp.com. Thank you for your sponsorship of On Texas Football and for the gear that Jerry likes to wear. I love my hat here. This is my favorite right now, by the way. I love this hat. My dad's jealous, by the way, about him. All right, we literally should be getting the news any minute now of Nick Brooks. I think CJ, you and Matt, our producer, are monitoring that for us at this point in time. Jerry, I will interrupt you if he makes a decision and CJ gives me the go-ahead. But what I was going to say, can you tell people a little bit about Jonah Williams as they wait to hear what Nick Brooks has to say here?
Yeah, so Jonah, Bobby, people want another Manscaped read, by the way. So Jonah, not happening. So Jonah Williams will announce at 6:30 tomorrow evening in Galveston at the new Ball High Stadium. CJ and I have heard the same thing. I think everybody has heard the same thing, that Texas or LSU is where the decision's coming from. We continue to hear good things about Texas. We've had it at 65% since the beginning of the week. It was just luck. It wasn't anything I did special, but when we were down there a couple of weeks ago and on Texas football's down there, the first practice of the season, I just asked Jonah if he was playing basketball this year, because we always talk about hoops, because I'm from Friendswood. He's Galveston Ball, same district, blah, 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 blah. And so he's like, nah, I'm not playing. I didn't make anything of it. So I was like, he's just going to play baseball. He's concentrating on baseball. Then we started doing the interview, which you can archive. He was like, yeah, I'm graduating from high school in December. And I was kind of taken aback. I was like, wow. So he's essentially telling us he's choosing football over baseball, because if he enrolls in January somewhere, he's out of the MLB draft 3 years until he's 21. So he's effectively choosing football over baseball. He's going to play both in college, but that changes the calculus in this recruitment. He goes from a guy that would have been a top 3 round draft pick, more than likely, with a chance to move up with a senior season, and to a guy that prefers football. So over baseball, wants to do both, but prefers football. So that was when that recruitment changed that day, the first day of practice for Galveston Ball this year. And Texas, I think, has done a good job. They got the last visit, unofficial. They're not an official visit, but they've done a really good job with this recruitment. I think Blake Gideon stayed the course. When Jeff Choate left for Nevada, that recruitment changed to Blake Gideon recruiting him as a safety. By the way, Jonah Williams has dropped 10 pounds from the end of the school year. He's 6'3", 215. Then he's down to 205. He really does want to play safety. I actually talked to somebody very close to him that thinks he could be a really good wideout too, if he chose to go that route. They think he's just a guy that can play the ball in the air with size and athleticism. So Jonah Williams would announce his decision tomorrow about 6:30 Central Time. New Ball High Stadium, sponsored by Manscaped. No, but that's a great idea. Whoever said that in the chat. But we'll have a live. We'll be on live at that time tomorrow evening.
I look at it, and we're talking right now a little recruiting, Longhorn recruiting, sitting at 16 commitments. Nick Brooks is expected to announce any minute right now. CJ, has he gone live yet on his Instagram live to your knowledge?
Not that I've seen, at least not on his personal account. I believe that's where it is going to be held. So waiting on that to go live right now, of course. Jerry, real quick to add to that Jonah Williams conversation. Blake Monroe and I have both heard that Texas baseball, as a result of hiring Jim Schlossnagle, is playing a big role there. Obviously, it is Steve Sarkisian and the football staff that is kind of taken over and kind of leading the charge there. But that is playing a large role right now, even if the MLB draft is off the table for this year.
Well, it needs to be. They have to get, if he's going to be a football scholarship guy, football has to lead, but baseball can't be just non-existent. And I think that now football and baseball are working more simpatico, if that makes sense, between the two parties and making it a reality. Hey, before we hear from Nick Brooks, we want to look a little bit at what the various recruiting services rank him. Jerry, you call him did you have him a 4++ guy? Is that
no? I have him as a 4-star plus. I think he's a top, which to me, the way I rank guys before senior year, which I'm big on senior year with these guys. A 4-star plus guy is a guy that's a top 150 level prospect in the country. 4++ is top 75. 5-star is obvious, right? And a 4-star guy is a top 375-ish prospect in the country. Could be anywhere from 170, 151 to 375 in that range. Just a level of guys, how I see it. But this is where people have him nationally, which, so look, one person has him as an 89. Remember, Cam Williams is also an 87 or an 89 for high 3-star most of his senior year, by the way, and was clearly a lot better than that. So that's where people have him ranked.
It's tougher to rank some of these and kind of get those early evaluations on bodies that are this big, right? Because you have the questions of, do they move well? Can they move in space, especially at the tackle position? And then also, do they spin inside? Do they stay out on an island? But when you see it in person, especially with Cam Williams, who was criminally underrated out of Duncanville, when you hit right on these guys and you get them on campus to mold their bodies and develop with a true offensive line, and Jerry, you made a great point earlier, to get that consistency in coaching year in and year out, to build on what you're initially taught and having to work on with one coach year after year, very important. And I think when you see a Nick Brooks in action, that ranking that you see right now will certainly maybe be exceeded very quickly in his college career because of getting that development and that nutrition right with that strength and conditioning spot. We saw it with Cam Williams. We're obviously expecting it this year as well. I think Nick Brooks is very similar in the build in that regard.
My take on those rankings are really pretty simple. As long as he has that skill set that Kyle Flood wants and the size that Kyle Flood covets, throw the rankings out the window. That's kind of where I go. I know that isn't necessarily what people want to hear, but that's how I feel about a lot of them. I will say this, Jerry and CJ, not only if Texas gets Nick Brooks here, and whenever he announces, it's supposed to be in the next few minutes, I believe, not only is Nick Brooks in that category of top 150, 250 players in the country, but also Jonah Williams is certainly in that category, probably maybe even ranked higher. And Michael Terry out of Alamo Heights is as well. So those are three, what I would categorize as blue chip guys the Longhorns are really wanting. And we're not talking about the typical skill position players. They're bonus size guys with Jonah Williams and Michael Terry. And then you also have Nick Brooks, who's just a bonus size offensive lineman as well from a nationally ranked perspective too. So you look at it in that direction. And I think that we're looking at a run here a little bit late that could be a major interest in, and not even, that doesn't even count a skill position, more typical skill position player in Jamie French, who's a prototypical size, not necessarily typical, given the fact that he's so highly ranked as well.
Well, hey, we may be here a while because apparently Nick's going to announce at 4 Central time now.
Ooh! Did he say that now? So 4 Central instead of
it was originally supposed to be at 4 East Coast time, but let's see here. Some people in the chat are saying 4 Central time. Let me see if I can get an answer real quick.
Anyway, we'll spin it back as we figure this out real quick. Back to Jonah Williams, because I know that this has been a big topic of conversation where Texas fits right now. I know a decision's coming up here soon, but I actually got a text from a guy I talk to pretty often about these big recruitments, and they have a good idea of, one, the NIL side of things, and two, these big profile recruitments and where things kind of sit. And one thing he messaged me earlier this week was, I wouldn't surprise me if Oregon makes another late run, right? We've seen it at times with Josiah Sharma. Obviously, DeCorian Moore went that direction. Dorian Brew, in a way, kind of came out of nowhere, and Oregon kind of jumped in. He mentioned that to me late Tuesday night, early Wednesday morning as something to watch out on. This morning, I got a text and said, it's not going to it won't come to kind of that fruition that we've seen in previous recruitments with Oregon and Jonah Williams. So I know that there's been some topics of whether or not he wants to go out to Oregon and play in Eugene. I know that DeCorian Moore and some of those guys in that class have been in his ear trying to get him into that class. Right now, I'm told that it's not going to be enough on the Duck side as of 3:09, August 23rd. That could change, but right now I'm leaning towards the Longhorns being another joyous live stream tomorrow at some point, perhaps. But I did want to pass that along. I wanted to pass that along in a sense because I know that that's always kind of a threat, especially this cycle with Oregon. They did make a run here. I'm just being told it's not going to be enough.
Yeah, I that one would have always, even when the picks were coming in, and by the way, everybody's picked Jonah Williams to go everywhere except Prairie View A&M at this point in our industry. But look, nobody in that family has gone far from home. And I've always stuck by that. Is the dad went to Galveston Ball and played at University of Houston. His older brother, Nick Williams, obviously was committed to Texas. I think Texas knew he was going to go pro. He ended up signing with A&M, goes sandwich selection of the draft. Still wasn't leaving college. Middle brother, Seth, is playing JUCO baseball at Galveston Community Colleges in year 2. Nobody's left the state yet. Nobody's gone far from home yet. LSU's not far from home, but nobody's gone far from home in the family yet for college. So he would have been a true trailblazer in that, and that would have always surprised me if he went that far from home. So we'll see what happens tomorrow at 6:30.
Well, guys, if we're going to have some time, and I'll wait for you to do that, we'll look a little bit at what the current situation is right now for the Longhorns and their recruiting class. You see it right here, ranked 14th nationally by On3. Their class rank in the SEC is just 8th right now at this point, yet 14th overall. Don't forget, 9 of the top 20 teams in the country going into this year, according to the AP poll, are SEC teams. So that's the brethren that Texas is keeping. I figured it'd be a good time for us to maybe talk about each position, and we have some time here to fill, and what Texas has brought to the table.
I got an update.
What is it?
By 3:30 Central Time, I think he'll commit.
Central Time?
Yeah, in the next 20 minutes. In the next 20 minutes.
Okay, is that from Nick himself by chance, Jerry Hamilton?
No comment.
Good stuff. Good stuff there. Hey, look, we do have some time to talk about recruiting in general. If y'all want to do that, y'all good to do that?
Let's do it.
All right. Quarterback, KJ Lacey. One of the guys that I think Texas needed another quarterback to just continue this line. Sark has done a nice job of handpicking his guys and doing it fairly early in the process. KJ Lacey, though, last year, his timing surprised me as much as anything, not necessarily how good he was, but when he chose to commit, and he's kind of stuck with it, and Texas is stuck with it. He works with a guy down in New Orleans, Mobile area that is with QB Country, same guy that works with Arch Manning. What did y'all think about this commitment of KJ Lacey? And we can talk about it from there.
So one thing Sark always starts with when talking about a quarterback on the skill side is he can make all the throws. How many times have you heard him say it. He doesn't recruit anybody that can't make all the throws. So that's when I always laughed when people questioned Arch Manning's arm strength coming out. I was like, well, he doesn't have the strongest. Okay. Well, Sark only recruits guys that can make all the throws in an NFL system. So X that one, you're wrong. Same thing was said about KJ Lacey. Look, I've seen KJ Lacey in person 3 times. Not once did I walk away saying he lacked arm strength. So he can make all the throws required in Steve Sarkisian's system. So one, Sark isn't recruiting. You're going to watch Diabell tonight at 7. Sark isn't recruiting anybody that can't make all the throws. The thing I like about KJ as a player is, well, he's got some moxie to him. Yeah. You know, he was a point guard in basketball, and then he became football for full time. So he's got the whole point guard basketball quarterback combo thing. But he's just got a little game. He's got a lot of gamesmanship to him. He's a guy that can improvise and make accurate throws. Now, last 2 seasons, he's played with an older offensive line. And I think they kick off their season tonight. This year, it's a younger offensive line. I actually think that's going to help KJ Lacey because he's going to play under duress a little bit more. He's going to get to show his playmaking skills with the ball in hand. That a plus functional athleticism. I don't think you're going to see them run him a lot in that offense. His head coach is a tremendous quarterback at Southern Miss and in the NFL and CFL. You're not going to see a bunch of QB run game stuff with him, but he's going to get to play more under duress and on the move. I actually think I'd love to watch quarterbacks play under duress at the high school level like Arch Manning did. So I think KJ's a gamer. I think he's a playmaker. I think he's got moxie, leadership. He's got point guard feet. He's got basketball feet. And he's good. He's just a guy that knows how to make plays and does it accurately.
Yeah, Jerry, I was going to say 2 of the exact same things, right? He's got the basketball background. He said it was actually Riley Leonard who dunked on him or dunked close to him when he was in the paint that made him realize, I don't know if I want to be playing basketball anymore. That was a fun conversation I had with him earlier this spring, but he was a great point guard. And I think to be a quarterback, there's a few things. You'd like to have, one, a shortstop background in baseball, be able to make throws at all different angles, or 2, you'd like to have that point guard mentality to distribute. And I think that's one of the things that shows up on film with him is he's able to create outside of the pocket, create under duress, and find ways down the field to get the ball where it needs to go. So that's one of those things I think is innate at some point with quarterback. And then again, to play under duress this year, or at least a little bit more than what we saw his junior year, Jerry, I look at Trey Owens, and the biggest thing that I saw from him in his senior tape is, he can find any way to escape pressure in that pocket and find a way to get that ball out down the field. And what did we see translate immediately in the spring when he first got to campus? Dropped back, felt pressure behind him, moved up in the pocket, delivered a strike, and the fight song was playing soon thereafter. It was one of the best plays of the afternoon from a quarterback, and it's because of that, kind of pressure that he felt all the way throughout high school. To have that and some of that, experience there, it's so valuable going into the next level when the game speeds up. I know you're going to have a better offensive line, but those edge rushers, those linebackers, and those defensive tackles, they're going to be just as quick, if not more so. So to have a little bit of all of that for KJ is very important there.
Guys, I tell you what, we're going to continue on and talk a little bit next about running backs. We are awaiting, for people just joining us, we are awaiting the decision of Nick Brooks. He was initially expected to announce at 3:00 today, Central Time, 4:00 Eastern. According to Jerry, he apparently has moved that back a little bit to 3:30. So we'll be waiting by here. In the meantime, I figured it's good enough to do a little impromptu chat about the recruiting class overall as we wait for Nick Brooks' decision. CJ and Jerry, we're just talking about quarterback KJ Lacey out of Saraland High School in the Mobile area of Alabama. I think it'll be interesting for KJ this year too, Jerry and CJ. He's going to be without his receiver, Ryan Williams. And so he becomes even more of a focal point or a leader of this offense. Not that he wasn't already the leader as the team's quarterback, but even more onus gets put on his shoulders, right? What do y'all make, though, of him not necessarily grading as high as some other guys like Keelan Russell out of Duncanville in the Elite 11? I mean, that's always a hot topic. I have my own opinion of that. Jerry, what about you?
I'm not And I love Keelan Russell. I've talked about him. I was talking about him here last spring on this shows, but I'm not a big Elite 11 guy. And not that I don't appreciate it, but it's just not. I've attended it, covering it, and that sort of thing. I think the most valuable thing about Elite 11 is what you don't see. They're them in the classroom, them in the boards, and all the things not on the football field. I appreciate it. It's a good chance to watch those guys, but it's just not. It's so far from a football setting that that's just not kind of my thing with the quarterback position. I would love to be able to sit in on the meetings when Trent Dilfer's on the board with those guys. That's a part I would love to be able to see about Elite 11. But I think Keelan Russell's an extremely talented guy in his own right. I was there. I was at Duncanville last year when Bobby Petrino was at A&M, and they offered him that day. He wasn't there in person. Kendall Briles. I'm trying to think. There's about 7 or 8 college quarterback coaches, OCs out there that day that also recruited that school. So there were a lot of people at that practice. And, Keelan Russell, very talented quarterback, obviously going to Alabama. I think the interesting thing about recruiting is how early this process is. I mean, look, Sark has had a quarterback committed in June. I can't remember the exact day Diabell committed, but we're moving to June announcements for the quarterbacks that are going to be juniors. So they're announcing in the June before their junior season. That's where quarterback recruiting is going right now. The guys are committing that early, and there were some before that. There were some guys committed in April, May in the 26 class. So the recruitment of quarterbacks is getting earlier and earlier. I think trying to lock those guys in, trying to build your class. Look, Texas offered 2 guys in 2027 based on the camps June 1 at the Texas Elite Camp. So they're already making moves on 2027 quarterbacks. So these decisions are made after sophomore seasons. And that's just where we're at right now in quarterback recruiting at the major schools.
All right, let's talk a little running backs now. We talked as much as we could about KJ Lacey and the quarterback room that Texas brought in, and adding to Trey Owens as well as Arch Manning and Quinn Ewers. But after that, we look at the running back group. 2 guys, Ricky Stewart and James Simon. CJ, what do you think? This is you're bringing up picture right now of Ricky Stewart, young man out of Tyler Chapel Hill. Give us your thoughts on the 2 running backs Texas has offered.
I think that they are very compatible, right? I think they play off one another very well. And when you look at what Texas has been able to add over the last few years at the running back position, you're working with the true stable that can do a lot of things, right? And I think at points right now, you're looking at a Texas room without a CJ Baxter that might be a little limited in terms of being able to have that outside speed, home run ability, that inside power running, as well as some of those stretch zones, right? I see some Jonathan Brooks with Ricky Stewart. I think that might be a little bit of a lazy comp given the recency there, but he's not going to blow you away with his speed. He has great balance and he has great vision. And one thing with Ricky Stewart is he will grow in his frame, and already he's not a guy that ever really falls backward, right? And that's kind of been a trend with Texas running backs, is when they're hit and they're met in the hole, very often are they the ones falling forward to gain extra yards. And that, I thought, was one of the more impressive parts of a Jonathan Brooks was, he would get hit at the line of scrimmage, but he would almost in a way kind of army crawl over bodies or through physical, kind of that head-on collision to get extra 3 or 4 yards on most runs. And I thought that was really impressive. I see that with Ricky Stewart. I think he's going to be more of that big back that you see at Texas. Again, not a blazer, but he's got great one-cut ability, and he's got the opportunity to really become an impressive physical running back for the University of Texas when he arrives.
All right, he's one thing about Ricky, I would say he kind of reminds you of Trey Wisner. He's a little bit of a slasher that is really quick to the second level. The one thing, when I went to schools in East Texas, I stopped at 3 schools. 2 had played against him. One coach had been scouted him because they were playing common opponents. They all said he was faster than you think in person. They said he looks fast on tape, but then when you get in the game, he's even faster. And I think that's kind of proven out with Ricky Stewart. He has a little bit of that Trey Wisner slasher, that one-cut slash to him, and is really explosive to the second level. The other thing with Ricky, really good hands, really physical player. That's the other thing. Kilgore went up against him multiple times. They said the coaching staff there says he's more physical than you think. So physical guy that does not avoid contact. He relishes contact. So I think, look, there's been a lot of really good running backs from East Texas. And there's one thing with all of them. They're all tough kids. And Ricky Stewart's one of them.
Jerry, stay with us and talk a little bit about the other running back committed, James Simon out of Shreveport.
Yeah, James Simon came down to Texas, Notre Dame, A&M picked Texas. Obviously, Tashard Choice knows his father, so there's a great connection there. His father being a former standout running back at Louisiana Tech, briefly in the NFL, now coaches college football. That was another check of the box for Tashard Choice, that a father that coaches that's a college football coach that's been either a running back coach, receiver coach, or even an OC is sending his son to continue his development with Tashard Choice. So now we get to the skill set. He's a bigger guy than Ricky Stewart. Will be 6 foot 215 probably. He's about 200 right now. He's at Shreveport Calvary Baptist up there. When Evangel Christian kind of split up and the coaching staff split up, when they went to Calvary Baptist, they started getting some really good players. That was years ago, but the program's built itself. So not every kid's at Evangel in the private schools in Shreveport anymore. And James Simon is a really instinctive running back. He's got really, he's got really good cutback vision. He sees the cutback, and that's him. He is not going to go blow away a combine running a 40 or anything. But what he is, man, he can cut. He's got really good vision. He reads linebackers. He is a run maximizer. He catches the ball really well. The backfield, he really fits Sark's running game in between the tackles, guys. He is a near perfect fit in what Sark wants to do in the run game.
All right, I got a super chat here. I want to give y'all something real quick and talk about. How many teams, this is from Jay Lee, ahead of us in the rankings? We mentioned earlier Texas ranked 14th in the recruiting rankings right now. How many teams ahead of us are actually close to full? I've got some notes on that.
Right.
So I kind of did that while I was letting you guys talk about the running backs. Notre Dame is 13th, Texas 14th right now, but Notre Dame has 22 commitments compared to just Texas's 16. Oklahoma is ranked 11th right now, but they have 7 more commitments than Texas. You keep going. Miami is 10. They have 22 commitments. Texas A&M is 8, but they have 20 commitments. That's 4 more. Tennessee is 6 overall in the country. Just got one of the nation's top offensive linemen, if not the top. But they're at 24 commitments. They have 8 more players. Auburn is at 5, but they've got 23 commitments. Georgia and LSU are at 22, 24, and 21 total. So all of those schools, there are a couple that are in that category with Texas. Oregon is one of those. Clemson is one of them that Texas has to contend with and stay ahead of, or in the range of, as they add these players. But
this is the same as it was last year for Sark. Look, they added Brandon Baker, Ryan Wingo, Kobe Black. Those recruitments carried on later than originally thought. So they added all those guys after the season, actually the first ball kick to the season. Then they added Phil Samee. They flipped Wardell Mack, Ty Anthony Smith after a coaching change, Aaron Butler, a late offer. So they added 7 guys last year to get to their number. So if you look there, I mean, Texas and Michigan have the highest ranked classes that don't have. And Florida State has 13 commitments, obviously, there. But that they have a lot of room left. But they go more portal. But if Texas signs 24 guys, I mean, they're going to have – whether they're ranked 4, 5, or 6, I mean, that pretty much comes down to maybe one guy in a class, taking one extra guy at times, and where's that guy's ranked. But, look, wake me up if Sark doesn't sign a top 5 level class. They could be ranked 4, 5, 6, or 7. But if Texas signs 24 guys and has a good season on the field, now are they going to fill all their needs? That's a different discussion.
Yeah, and that's kind of where all of this begins, right? Is Texas getting the bodies that you need at defensive line? Are they filling in linebackers? Are they adding enough in the secondary, right? It's all a numbers game right now. And I thought Sarkisian's comments earlier this week about the roster expanding to 105 was pretty pretty interesting, right? He said, you know what? We're still trying to figure out what our approach is going to be. Do we bump our signing classes up to 30 to 35? I think that's most likely. Do they go out and they start scouring the portal instead of taking 8 to 10? You know, maybe that's up to 15 or 20. That also is a possibility. So until we have a true idea of, one, what the staff wants to do, and two, what kind of works better long term, I think that'll be interesting. You know, there's going to be a number of ways that you can fill out your roster once those that scholarship number expands. But right now, it's kind of just sitting around waiting for that to come into place, and then you'll get a true idea of what works and what doesn't. Just like how we've talked about Ole Miss and Florida State being kind of two, you know, those test rats in a lab. You know, can you go out and add 15 starting caliber guys out of the portal and expect to compete for a conference championship or the college football playoff? Well, Florida State, it worked last year. Ole Miss trying to, kind of run it back with that same blueprint. We'll see. We'll see if that's a viable solution there.
Somebody's asking about Joseph Mbaktu out of Grayson, the D tackle that they offered a couple weeks ago, visiting Texas. I expect that to happen. Florida offered him really early. This is his first year of padded football. He moved to the States from Cameroon, soccer player, basketball player, first year of padded football. He's a upside guy. Look, I love Texas offering D linemen in Florida. I mean, in the state of Georgia, I've said before, I counted 22 Power 4 level interior defensive linemen in the state of Georgia this year. That's an astronomically high number for one state. Caleb Bell, the son of Kendrell Bell, the former Georgia linebacker and NFL Pro Bowler. Caleb Bell was offered a couple weeks ago. He says he'll visit Texas for a game. He told me that a few days ago. The third one offered Braxton Kyle from North Gwinnett. Georgia offered him. I think that one that was a good offer. I'm not saying he won't visit, but if Georgia makes a serious run there, that one will be tougher. But Caleb Bell committed to Arkansas. Mbaktu committed to Florida. I do think both those guys will visit Texas during the season.
All right, we're waiting right now for the decision of Nick Brooks. Jerry just mentioned him, teammate, a defensive line teammate committed elsewhere right now, but Texas continues to track him. Nick Brooks out of Grayson, Georgia, by way of Cedar Rapids, Iowa. He is expected to announce. It was originally anticipated at 3 o'clock Central, 4 o'clock Eastern. We've been told it's kicked back to around 3:30. People are conjecturing why. My typical response on these things, having done this for 30 years, is that we are dealing with young people, and punctuality is not always the big strength of theirs. So when they say 3, it might be 3:15 before you jump in the car, right? Yeah. It might be 4. So that's what we're dealing with right now. Don't think it's anything nefarious or anything like that. I saw a couple comments in it is what it is. It happens all the time in this. Hey, guys, before we go to this next question, or before we talk a little bit more about Nick and wait on his decision, RJ Yarbrough had something that I thought was pretty good. Question. Thoughts on possibly eliminating spring portal? Ross Dellinger of Yahoo reporting today that the D1 Council is discussing eliminating the spring portal. This is breaking news within the last 2 or 3 hours. Eliminating the spring portal. They would only be able to portal out at the end of December. That 1 month window. What do y'all? And Ross also reported that if the D1 Council accepts that, it would go into effect this year. So that's big. You wouldn't be able to add people necessarily after spring ball in Texas's case, or you wouldn't be able to lose people after spring ball. You know, the only thing that would be limiting you really after spring ball to just grad transfers. What do y'all think about that? In some ways, it's probably returns us to normalcy a little bit, right?
Yeah, my issue with it, and CJ and I addressed this on the live stream, twofold. If you have so if that's the only window is in December, if you have a coaching change, you're totally screwed. Because the early signing period moves up is December 4th through 6th now. If there's only one portal window, you get a job, guys are coming. You don't really have time to get guys. They're coming and going, but more guys are going than they're coming at that time. From a transfer out standpoint, that's what's crazy to me is if you have a coaching change, I mean, you got to throw your hands up and say, what are we supposed to do here, man? I mean, I guess you don't miss on a coaching hire. Nobody ever gets fired. That's not realistic. That's my first thought. My second thought, Bobby, is, I mean, I don't know. I just don't know how that truly works. There's got to be at least a 2 or 3 day window at another period of time. It can't just all be in December and then your grad transfers. I mean, I just don't know how that truly works, because you're penalized for being a good team and making the playoff. It's like the NCAA basketball tournament when the portal opens. It's almost like you're having a great year in the playoffs. Too bad other people are bringing guys from the portal on visits, and you're trying to prepare for a playoff. How does that make sense?
Hey, it's not just that. Don't forget, it's guys that are backups on your team that need to enter the portal at a certain period of time, like Malik Murphy did a year ago.
Even during playoff runs.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you think Malik Murphy really wanted to leave his team in the middle of December?
No.
I mean, so I think that we'll see how it goes and see if it gets ratified. But apparently, they have the votes. That's what Ross is saying in his article. He thinks they have the votes to get it done. See, CJ, I see you chomping at the bit to talk a little bit here, so I'll let you do that.
Yeah, I do think college coaches would prefer this, right? Maybe just one window. The issue is, when is that window? And I do think that has to come either right before, the start of the spring semester, towards maybe the end of January, or right before spring football. You can't have it in the middle of the college football playoff, because then, again, you're punishing teams that go through coaching changes, or two, you're punishing teams that are in the college football playoff. And right now there's 12 of those. And that list is soon to expand, right? How are you supposed to combat a new opponent each week, potentially, if you're going to go win a national championship, and make sure that you're addressing portal needs for the upcoming season, or retaining guys that are going to hop in the portal and see somewhere else? You can't do it. Not enough time in the day. These coaches already have enough on their plate with the first signing, or the early signing period at the beginning of the month. They try to bump that out of the way. If you're going to keep all of that congested for those college coaches, it's not viable. You see why there's already been some coaches and coordinators that have made the jump up to the NFL to be assistants or position coaches. It's because, December's hell. And it's already difficult with the portal and all the nuances that come on there. I just don't know if that's – I don't think that that's an area in which you can keep the portal window open. But, you got to get these kids on campus at some point to have their education and school line up. So it's going to have to be a small window, but it has to be later on than in the middle of this big playoff push for most of these guys.
All right. Thanks, RJ, for the super chat as well. We're going to go to this question real quick. What WTP – Sports News, does the group of five have a bid into the playoffs? Let me read you something that the New York Times wrote today, and it explains it really well. In the new college football playoff, automatic bids will be extended to the 5 highest-ranked conference champions, meaning a group of 5 school is guaranteed to get in. So you have to be a conference champ, and the top 5 conference champs are automatic entrants. The at-large teams the next at-large spots go to the next 7 highest-rated teams. So basically, you are guaranteed at least one Power 5 conference team in that grouping. All right, we're going to still waiting on Nick Brooks here, the big offensive lineman out of Georgia, to make his announcement. It's been at 3 o'clock, then 3:30, and I think it's still moving around some more. I see Jerry trying to check his phone every so often to see if he's got any timing updates. We will see what that means and follow this to its logical conclusion. Hey, the other thing I want to mention is we were talking about running back and quarterback already. Wide receiver at Texas. Right now, Longhorns with just one wide receiver in this class, Khalil Lockett. They have 2 others they're after right now, Jamie French, obviously, as well as Michael Terry. Those 2 Longhorns looking pretty good at. French is supposed to be the next one that makes a decision on August 30th.
Yeah, Jamie French will announce at 8:30 Eastern time on Friday, August 30th. So that's 7:30 here. So we'll probably be on early for coffee and food. It'll be early coffee and football next Friday. Texas, Miami. I think Texas has done a great job in this recruitment, has really good relationships with Jamie and his family. Obviously, Miami is going to make Texas earn it, and I think that's the way it should be. I said the same thing with FSU, with Cedric Baxter, Florida with Jarrett Gibson. That's the way recruiting should be. I mean, this stuff shouldn't be easy. So you wondered who was going to make the run at Jamie French, and for a while it looked like it'd be Tennessee. Late after the late July visits, like it's Miami, Texas, and Miami, with Tennessee and LSU still trying. I think LSU's up against it a little bit. He's got a lot of family there. I'm just not sure that's the spot. I think Texas leads Miami, but we'll see if anything changes. We'd start to hear about it late this weekend, I think. CJ, Michael Terry, I know you were down there last week.
Yeah, definitely. Texas recruiting them all over the place, right? That was a big topic of conversation after the official visit. Wide receiver still on the board for Michael Terry at Texas, as is kind of that flex hybrid big body that we'll eventually see from Amari Niblack this week. Oregon, Nebraska, the two that you got to watch out for here as well. It's a 3-team race. The big question is, will the hour 15 drive from San Antonio Alamo Heights be enough? Will the opposing pitches be enough to overcome that? That proximity to home is big. I do think that Nebraska pitching him a little bit as that kind of big flex body running back that they use all over the field. Running backs on the field or on the pitch right now for Nebraska, as is Oregon. I think he just wants to find a place where the ball will be in his hands. Matt Rule's very involved for Nebraska. Coach Stein, the offensive coordinator for Oregon, who's done a tremendous job recruiting the state of Texas, as in Central Texas this year as well, has been the focal point from Oregon's side of things. This one really changed, Jerry and Bobby, during the official visits, when it was an entire staff approach to recruit Michael Terry. There were a number of defensive coaches involved here. It was A.J. Milwee, it was Jeff Banks, it was Steve Sarkisian, it was Chris Jackson. Everybody was involved at some point in this recruitment. That's paying off a lot. I know that Oregon, again, and I mentioned it for Jonah Williams earlier, they're going to make a run at some point, probably a week or two out from that decision for Michael Terry. Oregon was a school that Michael Terry mentioned to me that he had, some liking to. That was earlier in the cycle as well. As things have kind of dialed down and we get closer to a decision, he's keeping things very close to the vest. However, reports that I've had and that Jerry has had over the past 2 weeks or 3 weeks or so continue to lean more so towards Texas, having some confidence behind the scenes. And I think that's very important considering where that wide receiver class is right now. You could certainly look at it and say, your 3 wide receivers might be Michael Terry, Jamie French, and Khalil Lockett. I don't think anybody's going to be upset with that. Of course, we'll see what he ends up playing long-term at Texas, but he will get a crack at wide receiver should it all come Texas's favor whenever he makes his decision later in September, which is kind of the plan right now.
Somebody in the chat's asking about Jonah Williams. People are coming into the chat. Tomorrow, 6:30 in Galveston at Ball High New Stadium. Jonah Williams will announce his decision at 6:30 tomorrow, and obviously we'll be live for that.
All right. What about the tight end spot? We want to talk about that as well because Texas has 2 really good ones right now, in my opinion. Emory Winston, a Georgia product, and he's maybe the longest committed player outside of KJ Lacey in this class at this point, as well as Nick Townsend, guy out of a spring area that is just a tremendous all-around prospect. Those 2 would end up being the last 2 of the offensive skill position guys. Y'all feel good about that group as I do right now? Because I'm pretty impressed with them from an athleticism standpoint.
Oh, yeah.
That's a high athlete class with those 2.
Yeah, I mean, I love it. I think Nick Townsend's a stud, top 100 prospect in the country at edge, rush, linebacker, or tight end. Look, it's a lot of times what do we talk about with a big-time tight end prospect? Well, he's got to get more physical. He's got to play in line. He's going to have to develop as a blocker. And, yeah, you might have to develop technically if you're Nick Townsend. You don't have to develop in terms of physicality blocking. That guy will knock your helmet off and throw it into the stands after he does it. So, I mean, he's a very, very physical football player that also runs 10.95 and 100 meters at 230 pounds. There was a reason he was number 1 on the board at Bama and some other places. Texas has one of the elite prospects in the country, period, that happens to play tight end and also doubles as a guy that had, 70 tackles and 8 sacks last year. couple of interceptions, couple of caused fumbles for Decaney High. So people have asked where my first game of the season may be. High school seasons and scrimmages this weekend, starts next weekend. Port Arthur Memorial plays at Decaney next Friday. That could be my game.
Ooh. Yeah, I like that. Bobby, on the tight end position here, it's very similar to what I see with the running backs, right? They got a great duo that complement each other very well, right? Emery Winston Moore, that vertical down the field threat. I know that's more of his game. The physicality will come eventually when he gets to a college campus and in the college weight room and strength and conditioning programs there. Nick Townsend's a guy, and especially when you kind of compare what he brings to the table with the Jordan Washington. Ooh, could you imagine that duo on the field over the next 2 to 3 years? My goodness. But I think that he's a guy that can play in the trenches right away because he has that mentality of seeking contact. Again, some tight ends, and especially ones who maybe bounce around on, kind of that flex wide receiver, that outside spot. It takes some time for those guys to truly buy into the physicality of the trenches, especially in the SEC, where all we're talking about is elite level edges, outside linebackers, and nose tackles. Take some time to want to, have a wham block across the middle and go hit a 320-pound Deion Walker, right? That's not an easy thing to do. What is an easy thing to do is run routes. And one thing that's for sure about Nick Townsend is this guy seeks contact and he loves it. And that's why that's the conversation of him potentially playing on both sides of the ball to begin his time at Texas before finding one spot long term. I do think it's tight end for him, but man, they've got a really talented duo right there that, again, are very compatible, bouncing off one another very well.
All right, we're talking a little Longhorn recruiting right now, going down the positions of commitments that Texas has, as well as some guys still left on the board as we await the decision of Nick Brooks, big offensive lineman out of Grayson, Georgia. He was scheduled to make his announcement at 3 o'clock earlier today. That has since been moved back. He is still expected to make it today, a little bit later, we think. Was it 3:30? It could be until 4, etc. We're waiting to see what that is. But as we wait, we want to keep talking a little bit about the offensive, about the commitments for the Longhorns, kind of do a little impromptu recruiting breakdown for you guys. Jerry, the offensive line that Nick Brooks might be joining has a pair of brothers, Jordan and Devin Coleman.
Yep.
They also have John Mills out of San Francisco. He's been on this video on Texas football with us, as well as Jackson Christian out of Port Neches Groves. State champ, guy that plays for one of the Joseph sons down there at Port Neches. What are your thoughts on the offensive line group for Kyle Flood? Is this a good group? Do you think it's got a chance to be special? What are your thoughts?
I think it's a good group. Look, John Mills, I think, is an underrated guy nationally. He is mean. He's nasty. He's got really good arm length, 80-plus wingspan, 10-inch hands. He's 6'5 and a half, 325, but can move. He's continued to be a mover at that size. I think he's a really good fit in the SEC, whether that's at guard or right tackle. I think he's going to be a really, really good football player for Texas. And I think that's one Kyle Flood got on very early. It felt similar, even though it was different because Jaden Chapman was in Killeen. It was similar because Kyle Flood was on him really early. Washington legacy with 4 members that were athletes at University of Washington. So you had to get on him early. But Kyle Flood got him to campus 4 or 5 times before he committed to Texas. I'm very high on John Mills. I love Devin Coleman and Jordan Coleman. Devin Coleman has personality for days. I think he may play center. I think he'd be a hell of a center. He's a defensive lineman transitioning the offensive line. This will be his second year playing offensive line in high school football. He'll also still play on the defensive front, on the interior for Cedar Hill some. But he's a center guard, great personality, intelligent, funny kid. I'm a big fan of Devin Coleman with physicality and really good feet. And he only squats 5'15". I say only because Jordan Coleman squats 600 pounds or more. And 6'5", 350 could be a devastating guard, I think, in the run game at the next level. Jackson Christian, state champion last year. They beat South Oak Cliff. The year before, lost in a state championship game. This will be his 3rd year starting for, as you said, for son of Gary Joseph there at Port Neches Groves. He's a guy that'll play inside on the next level, really physical football player. He's got all these guys are 80-inch wingspan guys. So there's a type. They're large humans, 80-inch wingspan types. Pick Texas over Texas A&M. That was a legitimate head-to-head battle. Both those schools wanted him. I like where this offensive line class is right now. It's going to be 5 or 6. For 6, it would have had to fall perfectly. It did not earlier this week. I think if Nick Brooks were to commit to Texas, 5, that's a pretty good number for this class because 2026 in Texas is loaded.
Yes. Real quick, a guy I wanted to hit on is Jackson Christian. I mean, that's a guy that's been to 2 state championships. He's won 1. And Jared, we've talked to him outside of DKR. You've seen him in person a number of times. That guy's all business. I mean, he does not crack. He does not have many jokes, many laughs. He's here to see the site, see the campus, get back home and go home, right? He's very time oriented. He's very, put together mentally. And of course, when you see him flip that switch and get on the field, the mean streak comes out. I think that's very important to have as an offensive lineman in the SEC, to have that kind of mean streak and ability to flip the switch and just go, knock some heads around. That's what he's got. I'm a big fan of his. And I think, again, for him to be a guy that's been in a great program at PNG and to be in that, kind of conversation to compete at a state championship level once again, exactly the type of prospect that Texas has had success with in the past and has come to Texas and had great success with in the burnt orange and white. So I'm very excited for him. He's probably one of those underrated guys in the class that I think could certainly rise up with a strong senior year.
Somebody in the chat asked where Herb Hand is. He's at UCF as the OL coach, but he's a co-OC OL coach. He's OL coach. Gus Malzahn, obviously the play caller.
He was actually with Gus Malzahn, I think, at both Tulsa and Auburn at one point in time, too, before his time at the University of Texas. All right, guys, we're waiting right now on the decision of Nick Brooks, offensive lineman out of Grayson, Georgia, talking a little recruiting in the time period ahead. CJ Vogel, Jerry Hamilton, Bobby Burton with you. Guys, I look at this, and we talked about the offense now. Let's talk a little bit about the defense. One of the strengths of this recruiting class, at least at this point, is the edge position. You guys both mentioned that Nick Townsend might even be an edge guy if he so wanted to be. But the 2 that Texas has committed are 2 pretty strong prospects. Lance Jackson out of Texarkana, Pleasant Grove High School, and then Smith Orogbo, big defensive end out of Alief Hastings. Your grades on those 2 commitments at this point, Jerry, and what you think about them overall?
Big time. Saw both of them in person. Look, both top 50 is 75 level kids in the country that could end up being 5-star level prospects after senior season. Both of them are kind of on that cusp right now. Lance Jackson, I expect to have a big senior season up at Pleasant Grove. A good thing is he's transitioned more football and baseball. He hurt his labrum at not surgery required at Under Armour camp in Houston when he came down and destroyed everybody. And probably, they should have probably held him out after he knocked around a few people. But he kind of got some shoulder soreness, but it kept him from playing baseball for much of the year. So he was throwing 95 on the mound. Then he got that injury at the Under Armour camp in Houston when he was going just to show, he's a competitor. He drove from Texarkana to Houston to compete in the camp, which he didn't have to. He was committed to Texas. He was already ranked top 50 in the country. That's the type of competitor he is. 6'6", 265, 270. Will run in the 4.6 at the NFL Combine one day. I think he's a big-time prospect. Again, like Nick Townsend, he could be a hell of a tight end, by the way, if he wanted to do that, but he won't. Smith Orogbo, Bobby, you're a big fan of his, always has been. He's got the twitch. He's the edge rusher. He falls in line with the Trey Moore and the Colin Simmons of the world as far as that natural, twitchy, bendy edge rusher. Pick Texas over Oklahoma and Texas Tech. He's always going to stay close to home. Academics are huge with the family. Funny thing about his recruitment is the dad didn't even want to hear about football. That was for his son. He just wanted to hear about academics. That's it. I mean, I'm not going to name who it was, but I was told a story. One college that came to Hastings to have a sit down started talking football first, and discussion kind of ended. So this is a very academic minded family. And Smith, one thing about Smith outside of him as a player, the strength and conditioning program, his conversations with Zena were huge. I'll never forget. I talked to him after his official visit. And I said, what impressed you most about the Texas visit? And he said, Zena was 235 pounds when he showed up at Texas in January. He's 260 now, 255, 260. He said, what Zena said about the strength and conditioning program and Torrey Becton, Smith knows that's what he needs. He's 6'4" and a change, 220. He was probably 204 pounds last season, so he's plus 15. But he knows 250 is a number he's going to need to get to. 245, 250. Strength and conditioning program at Texas was huge with Smith Orogbo.
And to keep that quickness, at that size, Jerry, you're going to be working with a heck of a prospect with Smith Orogbo. Again, I think this is probably the strongest individual position group in the 2025 class. You got two really talented pieces. I'm a huge fan of Lance Jackson, the way that his frame kind of inspires, some really impressive physical ability on the field. Again, to throw 95 is remarkable at that size as well. But you mentioned possibly playing tight end, Jerry. If you haven't seen his junior tape of him on the field catching passes or blocking off the edge, go take a look at that while we wait for Nick Brooks to make his decision here, because he's a heck of a prospect, a heck of an athlete. Another guy that's very athletic for being as big as he is, right? He was 6'6", 270 when he visited in the spring. He said he's going to knock down to about 255, 260, and that athleticism is going to peak even more this senior year. He's probably my favorite prospect in the class at the moment.
I love Lance Jackson. I may like him as much or more as a tight end. I know y'all said that. I'm going to tell you, I think he's got a great pair of mitts as a tight end, and he is a tremendous all-around athlete as well. To your point, the thing that I love about Smith Orogbo is not only the twitchiness, Jerry, not only I think he has some natural arm strength with his hands, really gets into people. He sees the ball. Like a lot of guys can't rush the passer while seeing the ball and while seeing the quarterback. They're more worried about getting after the guy in front of them. He sees through it. He plays football with his eyes, which is really impressive for a down lineman. That's not something that's very easy to do.
No. And the big thing there too is outside of offensive line, the edge position may be the most improved under Texas, under Steve Sarkisian at Texas. Under Sarkisian.
That and quarterback.
Yeah. And they just added as good a class as they've had at edge from a high school standpoint with Lance Jackson and Smith Orogbo, and they're totally different players. I mean, Lance Jackson's a guy who could be 6'6", 285, 290, and you move him inside on third downs one day. I mean, Smith Orogbo could be that guy that, you tinker with at Sam linebacker because of his athleticism, and then he rushes the passer off the edge as well. So they're two different players and two of the best at what they do in the country.
Hey, guys, we're live.
Oh, boy.
Is live on Instagram right now. That means a decision finally coming soon here. It's only 3:56. But we are live on Instagram right now. We will have a decision from Nick Brooks coming shortly. So bear with
there
us.
we go.
A couple more moments, fellas.
He said 4 o'clock, and he had told us, I guess 4 Central, 4 Eastern, 3 Central.
Yeah, I think that. Well, yeah, and he texted me at 3:10 and said it'll be in about 20 minutes. I think they just had some issues setting up, but they are live now because he's at a looks like a sports bar in the Loganville, Lawrenceville area of Georgia there. So he is about to announce his decision on his Instagram live. Hey, and you know how large of a human is? He can barely fit in the screen.
I like those kind for offensive linemen now. That's a good thing, Jerry Hamilton.
Yeah.
We'll be awaiting his decision. You guys, please, we'll talk about that. Before we go we want to talk about maybe one of the latest big commitments for Texas as we keep talking about the recruiting class as a whole, and that's at defensive tackle. Getting Josiah Sharma has been one of the center points of this recruiting class. Texas needed an interior defensive lineman in the worst way, and they got him in Josiah Sharma. They still need more. I want to say that. They still need more, but at least one now is in the Longhorn ledger. Jerry, how big was that commitment for Kenny Baker?
Well, considering I'm out there on a limb saying it reminds me of Sean Rogers, it was huge, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there aren't many guys that are that big, quick, and powerful naturally. And he really reminds me of Sean Rogers. And I'm not talking about pro career. I'm talking about prospect. And he's got that frame too. He's going to be 6'5", 6'4.5", 6'5", 330, 335 pounds. He can play over the ball. He can play three technique. Nick Brooks is speaking, by the way. I think the flip from Oregon to Texas, I think Josiah Sharma is an underrated player nationally. I think he's a top 100 level kid in the country. And I think he'll play up to that level as a senior at Folsom. He was at Endercrum as a junior. Now he's at Folsom, where one of the best programs in California. I think the guy's going to have a monster senior season. And Nick Brooks is speaking now, so we're getting close to his announcement.
Jerry, real quick, another Georgia defensive lineman here being asked about. Anish Singh says, heard we're talking to Christian Garrett. He's out of Prince Academy, I believe.
He just committed to Texas, guys. Bobby, go boom.
Boom. Nick Brooks commits to the University of Texas. Very excited about that. Young man out of Grayson, Georgia, by way of Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Congratulations to him. Nick Brooks commits to the University of Texas, giving the Longhorns now 17 commitments on the recruiting campaign. We'll see what that does with their national rankings. It will definitely move them up. I don't know how much, but Nick Brooks commits to the University of Texas, big offensive lineman out of Grayson, Georgia. He was playing last night on TV, and I know a lot of guys had a chance to watch him, Jerry and CJ. Jerry, you said you watched that game. What did you think?
Yeah, so I think with Nick, the interesting thing for me with him is, look, his upside is extremely high. Texas, Georgia, and USC battling it out for a kid from Cedar Rapids doesn't happen very often on the offensive line. So his upside is extremely high. The one thing I've said about Nick Brooks before you get into anything, what you see athletically is he hasn't had, because of the family moves with jobs, he hasn't had any football consistency in high school. So I think when he gets to a strength and conditioning program at the college level, he's just going to take off. Because look, he was at Cedar Rapids as a JFK as a freshman. He moved to Alpharetta Private School as a sophomore, back to Cedar Rapids as a junior, back to the Atlanta area, Grayson as a senior. And it's all been job related. It's no red flags. It's not getting kicked out of schools and anything like that. This is all family related stuff. So he just hasn't had any football consistency. So think about being a kid that moves every summer somewhere. You have to adjust to a new head coach, a new position coach, a new team, a new system. You miss part of the summer workouts because you move. And so he just has had a lot of football inconsistency. Not his fault. It's part of life. Some kids go through it. So he is, to me, is really going to take off. That also means throw out his first 3 games on Huddle every year. Watch his last 7, 8, 9. He plays his way into better shape. He gets more comfortable with the scheme, the system, the staff, his teammates. That film back half is so much different than first half for him in high school. I think he's got a ton of ability. The question most people have, is he a right tackle? Is he a guard? And man, I'm going to say the same thing I say about a lot of these guys. Is sometimes the college coaches don't even know. They think he can play tackle. They know he'd be a really good guard, but they got to see that body quickness. They got to see when they get his body where they want it. And then they see that body quickness when guys like Colin Simmons are coming off the edge, a Trey Moore's coming off the edge at you. Where's your reactive quickness and your body quickness? He's got the feet. He's got the length. He's got the size. I think he does a really good job playing through contact. He had some really good moments last night against Thompson High in Alabama, who has an edge going to Auburn that's a stud too. I mean, there were so many studs in that game. I mean, Grayson on defense is so fast, it's not even funny. The linebacker kid going to Georgia Tech dominated that game last night, by the way. And they have a junior linebacker, Atkinson, that's absolute stud. Ryan Nelson knows about all of them. But Nick Brooks has a very high upside. He hasn't had football consistency. I think once he gets football consistency, strength and conditioning, and coaching, I think he's going to take off and be a really good player.
Yeah, the one point I wanted to point out there is, you might question the lateral ability, right? I think that's fair to assume off the bat at 6'7", 360 pounds, right? You don't see people moving that swift of feet, right, at that size. he's going to be tested, as Jerry said, whether it be a Colin Simmons, whether it be guys in his own class, a Smith Orogbo, a Lance Jackson. So to get an idea very early of whether or not he can sustain an island or have to be moved inside, you'll get a good idea. Luckily, this whole offensive line class, Jerry and Bobby, there's a lot of versatility there with guys that can do both. And I think that's very encouraging right now. Texas having 5 in the class, you fill out a full class, maybe you wanted 6, but 5 will work every single cycle. And again, it's not like Texas is necessarily hurting on the offensive line. This surely helps kind of forecast the future of that Great Wall of Texas that we hope to see at a high level down the road as well.
A lot of people
I like that term, Great Wall of Texas. Hey, Jerry, question for you. This is a Kyle Flood related question. You mentioned that there are multiple guys in this class that could be tackle guards. Is that what Kyle Flood tries to go after? He wants guys that are big enough to play guard no matter what, but might be able to play outside too. Is that the big human feature set, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, it is. And the key there is when a guy moves inside, if he's asked to pull, how does he pull? Like, what's that level? Because that's like the most underrated thing. I think we could bring up a Kyle Flood tweet, by the way. So that's the biggest thing for me. So when I look at a guy like John Turntine in the next class, he's not the large human size-wise. He's more going to be on the Justin Blaylock frame trend line. Going to be 6'3", 310-ish, 6'3.5". It's not 6'3", 6'3.5", 310, 315 when Turntine's all said and done. He can play tackle. He's got the quickness. He's got the body quickness, reactive quickness, smarts, length, all of that. But if you put him at guard, he's unbelievable getting out of his stance now. Unbelievable. So that's what Sark and Flood want, the guys that are big enough to line up against these big bodies in the SEC. That's what they've been planning for. And in this scheme, control the line of scrimmage when they want to run the football to close it out, play with the tight splits. So I think they've done a really good job recruiting to that. And now they need to get a couple of, with Fasusi going to Oklahoma, they need to get a couple of true tackles in the 26 class. I do think they'll do that.
All right, breaking down, Nick Brooks has committed to the University of Texas, 6'7", 360 pounds. Give me a break. Big human indeed. Larger human, I guess, is a better way to put it. He becomes the 17th commitment for the Longhorns on this recruiting campaign. CJ and Jerry, just big-time player. Another guy that keeps adding to this list. And, I was at the Dallas, Texas X's last night. And Alex Okafor, I sat between two big humans, by the way. Alex Okafor on one side of me and Tony Hills on the other. You guys aren't familiar with either of those two. They're much bigger than me. I'll just put it that way. And Tony Hills made a comment that I thought that was really intelligent. He talked about what he liked about Texas and Steve Sarkisian and what he's done. And he said the big guys up front is just so fundamentally different than where it was just 3 years ago. And, I found myself nodding my head in agreement with him because I think that is something that particularly along the offensive line has been fundamentally different under Steve Sarkisian and Kyle Flood. We talked earlier in this segment, Jerry, in this live stream, and CJ, about how defensive end over the last 4 years has kind of progressed into a team strength and continues to go to that direction. Well, Texas wasn't great at defensive end for a long period of time, but they had guys like Charles Menahue and some others that were good enough and end up being pro football players, et cetera, having good careers. But the offensive line didn't have that pedigree for a decade. And so while there was some pedigree there at defensive end, it has been not in the same category at offensive line. And Kyle Flood has flipped that switch almost as well, in my opinion, as Steve Sarkisian did at quarterback. Granted, Sam Ehlinger was a little bit different, but that's one of my takes on that is just how well they've done at the offensive line position here. You have something, CJ?
I was just going to say to add on to that, the commitments of Calvin Banks and DJ Campbell in the class of 2022, those were the first 5-star offensive linemen Texas had landed since 2008 or 9. It was one of those 2 years way back in the day. So to see that kind of become more consistent, to go out to Georgia/Iowa, to go out to California for a 5-star, Texas is winning big time battles on the recruiting trail that they normally would not have won historically. And they're getting more success out of guys at a younger stage to develop them now. They're retaining more bodies. They're simply just having more bodies. That's the biggest part as well. But it's been night and day versus what we've seen under the 2 previous staffs versus what Kyle Flood and Steve Sarkisian are doing currently.
Yeah, I love it. All right, hey, we talked. I want to go back and bring in the linebackers Texas has at this point in time, because we were breaking down the entire roster of commitments. If you're just joining us, Nick Brooks commits to University of Texas, big offensive lineman, 6'7", 360, out of Grayson, Georgia. But the linebackers, Jerry and CJ, right now, there are 2, Bo Barnes out of Dallas Skyline, as well as Jonathan Cunningham out of North Crowley, 2 DFW guys. Jerry, you've seen them both. CJ, you've seen them both. You know what? They make plays. I think that's what you want out of your linebacker as much as anything, right? Show a nose for the football and make a lot of plays. What do y'all think of that pairing?
Yeah, I saw both those guys last week when I was in DFW. Monday, I went to Skylines practice, watched Bo Barnes, almost 6'3", 239 pounds now. Looks really good. Obviously, he ran 10.96 FAT 100 meters at 230 pounds in the district track meet at the end of the spring there. He's going to play middle backer. Looks really good, retaining his athleticism, has good length. His linebackers coach at Dallas Skyline, Peter Jenkins. So you got that going for you. His head coach, Jacody Coleman, was a really good linebacker at Iowa. So he gets double linebacker coaching there. Jacody Coleman played at Beaumont Westbrook before going to Iowa. Was a really good player. So he gets a lot of linebacker coaching there. They'll play him on offense about 12, 15 snaps a game at running back, whatnot. So maybe a little bit of a hybrid tight end too, just to get the ball in his hands some. Jonathan Cunningham was at Dallas, was North Crowley's kind of athletic period walkthrough last week on a Thursday. You know, Cunningham frame-wise, his arms may be half an inch shorter, so he may not have the 79.5, 80-inch wingspan that Anthony Smith has. Maybe it's 78.5 to 79. Very similar frames, very similar athletes. Jonathan Cunningham plays outside backer. They put him in the slot to cover man. He'll even play some safety for them because he kind of will make some calls. The thing that impressed me about Jonathan Cunningham, more than what you see on tape, and this is why it's so valuable to go to these practices, even more so than games. He led the defense that day. He was, before they ever got on the field for the walkthrough, he was making sure guys knew what they were doing. They knew where to line up. They knew assignments. So he has some moxie. He's got a little bit something to him, which you like, but his physical upside's there. Really can run to the football, and instinctive player. So I think Texas got 2 really good linebackers in this class. Obviously, I'd love to add Madden Faramo. Notre Dame leads Texas right now in USC. If Madden Faramo gets back for a game this year, which is currently the plan, we'll see where it goes. But I think Texas has 2 really good linebackers committed. They want it to be a 3-man class.
All right, we've already talked a little bit about Caleb Chester, so we're going to bypass the lone defensive back in the class and instead break to something CJ has from us from Kalik Lockett, a little tweet from the wide receiver up in the DFW area. CJ, you got that ready for us?
Yeah, sure do. How about a we're not done? How about that? Out of the big time wide receiver from Saxe. Of course, a big decision is tomorrow for the Texas Longhorns. Of course, we've talked about it as well early on in the stream, but we'll reiterate it now since a lot of you folks have joined just lately. I feel good about potentially having another stream just like this, maybe a little shorter. But
yeah,
go ahead, Jerry.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jamie French a week from today as well. So, yeah, I don't think Texas is done yet either. Hey, by the way, because we've had thousands enter this chat, so let's show Caleb Chester's interception one more time from the scrimmage last night, if CJ can pull that up.
Yeah.
We don't need to talk about Caleb Chester after this one. Caleb Chester has football intelligence for days and is going to outplay any ranking he has. This is a play from last night. Okay, watch this interception, guys. Jumps route,
stays in bounds,
plays ping pong, runs away with the gloves and Texas cleats on.
That's a touchdown.
That's a pick six the hard way. They're calling him down here, but I think he was actually up when he made the catch.
That's so impressive. Just the wherewithal to stay with that ball, the coordination, to haul it in after juggling it around a couple times. That's a ball player right there. And that's a continual trend that we've seen with the defensive backs with Wardell Mack, Santana Wilson, and Kobe Black a year ago. They play for the football. They go out and they get it. And that's what we want to see more of with Texas defensive backs, I'll say.
Hey, LL's asked this like 4 or 5 times, so I need to answer this one for him because he asked about LSU trying to flip Caleb Chester. Will he stick? I talked to Caleb about that, and he has nothing going on with LSU. He didn't make that official visit to LSU back in June. He was gonna. I think he's very solid. And look, Aiden Anning probably commits to LSU tomorrow. They have DJ Pickett. They have Cade Phillips. So I think Caleb Chester and Texas are solid.
All right.
Some people are getting in the chat. Nick Brooks did commit to Texas. Absolutely, commitment 17.
Yep. That's going to do it for this special live stream. We were going to do about an hour long on Nick Brooks, but he kept us waiting until about an hour into the stream. Congratulations to him and his family. The newest Texas Longhorn, maybe one of the biggest as well, in Nick Brooks out of Grayson, Georgia. Thank you all for visiting with us today. I was glad to go over. We got a chance to go over all of the commitments as well and talk about them. CJ Vogel, thank you for your time. Jerry Hamilton, thank you for yours as well as Matthew Hutchison, our producer behind the scenes. For all of you guys, thank you so much. And for you, Nick Brooks, hook 'em, buddy.